absolutely, accurately, actively, actually, additionally, adequately, effectively, afterward, almost, altogether, amazingly, angrily, anxiously, anyhow, anywhere, apart, apparently, appropriately, badly, barely, basically, beautifully, beforehand, bitterly, boldly, briefly, brightly, brilliantly, calmly, carefully, carelessly, casually, certainly, cheerfully, clearly, closely, comfortably, completely, consequently, constantly, correctly, courageously, daily, dangerously, deeply, definitely, deliberately, delicately, differently, diligently, directly, distinctly, dramatically, eagerly, easily, effectively, efficiently, effortlessly, emotionally, entirely, equally, especially, essentially, eventually, exactly, excellently, exclusively, extensively, extremely, fairly, faithfully, famously, far, fast, fearfully, firmly, fluently, formally, freely, frequently, fully, further, generally, gently, genuinely, gladly, gradually, greatly, happily, hard, hardly, harshly, healthily, heavily, helpfully, highly, immediately, importantly, impressively, incredibly, independently, individually, inevitably, infrequently, initially, instantly, intelligently, intensely, intentionally, interestingly, internally, invariably, jointly, joyfully, just, keenly, kindly, largely, lastly, legally, lightly, likely, literally, locally, logically, loudly, mainly, mechanically, mentally, merely, merrily, moderately, mostly, mutually, narrowly, naturally, nearly, neatly, necessarily, negatively, nervously, normally, obediently, objectively, occasionally, officially, often, openly, optimistically, originally, painfully, partially, patiently, perfectly, permanently, personally, physically, plainly, pleasantly, politely, poorly, positively, possibly, practically, precisely, primarily, privately, professionally, progressively, properly, publicly, purely, quickly, quietly, rarely, readily, really, reasonably, recently, regularly, relatively, reliably, remarkably, repeatedly, respectfully, roughly, rudely, sadly, safely, satisfactorily, scientifically, securely, seemingly, selectively, sensibly, separately, seriously, sharply, shortly, silently, similarly, simply, slowly, smoothly, softly, specially, specifically, steadily, strictly, strongly, successfully, suddenly, suitably, superbly, surprisingly, technically, temporarily, terribly, thankfully, thoroughly, thoughtfully, tightly, totally, traditionally, truly, typically, ultimately, unexpectedly, unfortunately, universally, unnecessarily, urgently, usually, vaguely, valiantly, verbally, very, vividly, warmly, weakly, weakly, well, widely, wisely, wonderfully, wrongly, yearly, yesterday, yet, zealously, zestfully,